Ma'am, license and registration now.
Officer, I'm in labor. I need to get to
You
the
should have thought
hospital.
about that before speeding.
Please.
Papers
I'm
now.
serious. I can't.
Don't play games with me. Step out of the vehicle.
I can't even please just call the ambulance.
No.
The dashcam was recording everything. Every threat, every delay, every cruel second that put 2 lives at risk. What the officer didn't know was that this footage would become evidence in a case that would end his career, trigger a federal investigation, and ignite nationwide outrage. On a storm-soaked highway, a woman fighting for her baby's life was about to expose a system that failed her, and force accountability no one saw coming. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, hit subscribe, and stay with this story. Because what happens next changes everything. Rain streaked across the windshield in nervous, uneven lines, blurring the taillights ahead of her into long red smears. Imani Carter kept both hands tight on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, shoulders rigid, breathing shallow, and controlled the way the prenatal instructor had taught her. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Slow. Steady. Don't panic. She had practiced this moment 100 times in her head. The hospital bag packed by the door. The route saved in her phone. The list of emergency contacts pinned to the fridge. She had planned everything, because as a first-time mother, planning was the only thing that made the fear manageable. But nothing about tonight had followed the plan. Her water had broken early, soaking through the living room rug while she was folding baby clothes. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just sudden and terrifying. Her phone had slipped from her hand as the first real contraction hit. Sharp and deep and impossible to ignore. Her sister was supposed to drive her. Her neighbor was the backup. But at 9:47 p.m., nobody picked up fast enough. And waiting suddenly felt more dangerous than driving. So she grabbed her keys, her hospital bag, and whispered, "It's okay, baby, we're going," to the life pressing urgently beneath her ribs. Imani wasn't reckless by nature. She was careful. Polite. The kind of woman who apologized when someone else bumped into her. The kind who kept her voice soft in stores, who didn't argue with authority, who'd been taught, directly and indirectly, that staying safe often meant staying quiet. But fear had a way of sharpening priorities. Another contraction rolled through her, stronger this time. She winced, lifting one hand briefly from the wheel to brace against her belly. Her breaths came quicker now, more uneven. The GPS estimated 14 minutes to the hospital. 14 minutes felt both impossibly close and terrifyingly far. "Just hold on," she murmured to herself, to the baby, to the night around her. "We're almost there." Then blue and red lights exploded in her rearview mirror. Her stomach dropped harder than any contraction had yet. The siren cut through the rain like a blade, sharp and relentless, echoing inside the small car until it felt like it was inside her chest. Imani eased onto the shoulder with trembling hands, hazard lights blinking weakly against the darkness. Her heart pounded harder than the storm against the roof. Please, not tonight. She watched the patrol car in the mirror. The door opened slowly. Too slowly. A silhouette stepped out, broad shoulders, deliberate movements. No urgency. No concern. Just control. The officer approached from behind instead of the passenger side, boots crunching against wet gravel, flashlight already sweeping across the back seat as if he expected to find something hidden there. The beam lingered on her hospital bag. Then on her belly. Imani swallowed and rolled the window down. Cold air rushed in. So did the tension. "What's the problem?" the officer asked before she could speak. Not calm. Not curious. Sharp. Suspicious. I'm trying to get to the hospital," she said quickly, forcing steadiness into her voice. Another wave of pain tightened through her midsection. She pressed her palm harder against her stomach, hoping he'd notice. Hoping he'd understand. His flashlight flicked across her face. Her hands. The inside of the car. The way people looked when they were searching for something wrong. "You were speeding," he said flatly. "I know, I'm sorry, I'm in labor," she repeated, a little more urgently this time. My contractions are, they're close together. The officer didn't move, didn't soften, didn't step back in alarm. Instead, he leaned closer to the window, eyes narrowing slightly, like he was evaluating a story instead of a situation. Aha! That single sound landed heavier than any accusation. Rain slid down the glass between them, distorting his face just enough to make his expression harder to read. But his posture said everything. Arms stiff, shoulders squared, authority fully engaged, compassion nowhere in sight. Imani shifted in her seat as another contraction built, longer, sharper. She bit down on the inside of her cheek, fighting not to cry out. She'd been taught all her life to stay composed, to stay polite, to stay non-threatening. Even now. Can you please just call it in? She asked quietly. An ambulance or something. He straightened slowly, hand drifting toward his radio but not using it. Instead, his gaze swept the car again. The plates. The dashboard. The way she was breathing. Not as a man assessing a medical emergency. As an officer looking for a reason not to believe her. Behind them, traffic hissed past in wet streaks of light. Ahead of her, the hospital felt suddenly impossibly far away. Another contraction tore through her without warning, stealing the air from her lungs. Imani doubled forward with a soft, broken gasp, fingers digging into the fabric of her shirt as her body betrayed every attempt at composure. "You see," she whispered when she could breathe again, voice shaking. "I'm not lying. I need help." The officer's expression didn't change. If anything, it hardened. "Ma'am, sit up straight and answer my questions," he said, like she was being difficult on purpose. "Where are you coming from tonight?" Her mouth fell open slightly. The question felt unreal. "I from home," she said, blinking rapidly. "I was folding baby clothes when my water broke. Please, I don't have time for this." His flashlight shifted again, slower now, more deliberate. It passed over her hands, the car seats in the back, the hospital bag, then lingered on her face. "You got any drugs in this vehicle?" he asked casually. The words hit harder than the pain. "What?" she breathed. "Any warrants I should know about?" He continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Anything in the car that's gonna make this more complicated?" Imani stared at him, stunned. Fear began to pool somewhere deeper than her belly, colder than the rain soaking into her clothes. "I'm a teacher," she said softly, as if that should mean something. "I teach 3rd grade. I just want to get to the hospital." He didn't respond. Instead, he took a half step back, hand resting near his belt, eyes scanning her again with the same suspicion. Like her pain was a performance. Like her body was evidence he didn't trust. A horn blared from the highway as a car sped past too close. Imani flinched, heart hammering. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. Panic surged. "I can't," she pleaded, another contraction already building. "I'm telling you the truth. Please just call for medical help. Please." The word please came out smaller each time she said it. The officer's jaw tightened. His voice grew colder. "You're not gonna tell me how to do my job." The rain kept falling. The traffic kept moving. And inside the stopped car, time slowed to something cruel and unbearable, as a woman fighting to protect her child realized that her honesty meant nothing to the man standing outside her window. The pain stopped coming in waves and started coming like a tide that refused to pull back. It stayed. It burned. It stole her breath and left her trembling between each shallow inhale. Imani glanced at the dashboard clock. 10 minutes had passed. Then 12. Then 15. Each one felt stolen. Her phone lay in the cup holder, screen dark. She hesitated only a second before tapping it awake. Her hands shook as she swiped to the camera. Not because she wanted to record him, but because something deep in her chest whispered that she might need proof to survive this. She angled the phone slightly, just enough. The officer's voice cut through the rain again, sharper now. "You're not listening. Step out of the vehicle." "I can't," she whispered, another contraction ripping through her so violently she cried out this time. The sound wasn't polite. It wasn't controlled. It was raw. The dashcam light blinked steadily on the windshield. "Don't raise your voice at me," he snapped, as if pain were a choice she was making. Imani clenched the steering wheel, her vision blurring. Her breaths came fast and uneven. "Please. I'm begging you, call an ambulance." There was a pause. Not the kind that meant concern. The kind that meant calculation. "I'm not calling anyone until you cooperate," he said. The words landed heavy, final. Her phone captured everything. The refusal. The tone. The way he spoke to her like she was a problem instead of a patient. The way he stood there while she suffered. Another contraction hit and she groaned, head falling back against the seat. Somewhere far away, a car horn blared. Tires hissed through water. Life kept moving around her while hers felt like it was unraveling by the second. "I'm recording," she said softly, barely aware she was speaking aloud. The officer stiffened. "You better not be trying anything cute." Cute. She almost laughed at the word. Almost. The dashcam saw it all. Her shaking hands, the terror in her eyes, the way her body folded inward with every surge of pain. It recorded the delay, the negligence, the growing danger. And with every passing second, the footage became more than evidence. It became a ticking clock. Headlights slowed behind her. Then stopped. For a moment, Imani didn't notice. Pain had narrowed the world to her breath, her body, the terrible pressure building low in her abdomen. Her fingers were numb around the steering wheel. Sweat slicked the back of her neck despite the cold rain. Another car door opened. Another set of footsteps. "Hey!" A voice called out over the rain. Not sharp. Not authoritative. Just concerned. Human. "Is everything okay over here?" The officer turned slightly, irritation flashing across his face. "Keep moving," he said without looking back. "This is police business." But the stranger didn't move on. Imani forced her eyes open and saw a woman standing a few yards away, one hand lifted to shield her face from the rain, phone already in the other. Mid-30s, maybe. Hoodie pulled tight. Concern written openly across her features. "She's pregnant," the woman said, louder now. "I can see that. She looks like she's in pain." The officer's shoulders stiffened. "Ma'am, step back to your vehicle." "I'm calling 911, the stranger said calmly. Not defiant. Just certain. Those words cracked something open inside Imani's chest. Relief and fear collided. Tears slid sideways into her hairline as she nodded weakly toward the window. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure the woman could hear her. The officer turned sharply. "You don't need to do that." "I do," the woman replied. Her phone was already to her ear. "Yes, hi. I'm on Route 17 near the Brookside exit. There's a pregnant woman pulled over and she's in distress." The officer isn't calling medical help. The rain seemed to hold its breath. Imani watched the exchange through blurred vision, heart pounding. The officer's voice dropped, urgent now, controlled in a way it hadn't been with her. "That's not necessary," he said again, softer this time. Necessary. The word tasted bitter. Another contraction seized her and she cried out, unable to hold it back. The stranger's head snapped toward the car. Her voice into the phone sharpened. "She's screaming. She needs an ambulance now." The officer stepped away from the window for the first time. The power in the air shifted, not because of a badge, but because someone else was finally paying attention. And somewhere miles away, sirens began to answer a call that should have been made long ago. Red and blue lights bloomed across the wet highway, brighter than before, faster this time. Not just one patrol car. An ambulance. Another cruiser. Imani saw them through tears and rain and exhaustion, and something inside her finally loosened. The stranger was still there, standing firm on the shoulder with her phone raised. The officer had taken 2 steps back from the window, posture suddenly different. Less rigid. Less certain. Doors slammed. Boots hit pavement. "Where is she?" a paramedic called out. "Here," the stranger said immediately, pointing. "She's been begging for help." 2 EMTs moved quickly, their urgency unmistakable. One of them knelt beside the driver's door, eyes going straight to Imani's face, her breathing, the way her body curled inward. "Hi, I'm Jasmine. You're safe now," the paramedic said gently. "We've got you." The words hit harder than any pain. Behind them, another officer stepped forward. Older, calm, the stripes on his sleeve catching the light. A supervisor. His eyes moved from the patrol car to the officer, to the dashcam still blinking quietly on the windshield. "What's going on here?" the supervisor asked. The officer spoke quickly. Too quickly. She was non-compliant. Refused to follow commands. "I was in the middle of. Her water broke an hour ago." The stranger cut in. "She's in labor." The supervisor's gaze sharpened. He looked at the EMT now helping Imani unbuckle, guiding her carefully. He looked at the phone still recording in her shaking hand. "You're recording?" he asked her softly. She nodded. "So am I," the stranger added, lifting her own phone higher. Silence stretched. Heavy. Loaded. The supervisor turned back to the officer. "Did you request medical assistance?" The officer hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. It was enough. "Sir," the supervisor said, voice steady but colder now. "Step back from the vehicle." The officer froze, then slowly obeyed. The truth was no longer something that could be managed. It was already saved. Already documented. Already multiplying across devices and lenses. The EMT helped Imani onto a stretcher as another contraction tore through her. She cried out, but this time, hands were there to steady her. Voices were there to guide her. As they lifted her into the ambulance, she caught one last glimpse of the scene she was leaving behind. The flashing lights, the watching eyes, the officer standing alone under scrutiny instead of authority. For the first time since the siren had sounded, the balance of power had shifted. And everyone there knew it. By morning, the video was everywhere. It started quietly, the way stories always do now. A clip posted by the stranger with shaking hands and a simple caption. "Pregnant woman in labor denied medical help during traffic stop. This happened tonight." No hashtags. No edits. Just truth. It didn't need anything else. By noon, it had been shared thousands of times. By evening, millions. People watched the officer's face as he dismissed her. Heard the pain in Imani's voice. Saw the way time passed while nothing was done. They watched the moment the stranger stepped in, the shift when the supervisor arrived, the contrast between indifference and compassion. They watched and they felt it. Anger spread faster than the rain ever had. News stations requested the footage. Civil rights attorneys posted threads breaking down every violation. Medical professionals weighed in, horrified. Former officers spoke out. Mothers flooded the comments with their own stories, their own fear, their own close calls. The police department released a statement that night. Carefully worded. Neutral. An internal review has been initiated. The words sounded procedural. Polished. Safe. No one believed them. Pressure mounted. Protesters gathered outside the precinct within 48 hours. Signs raised, voices hoarse with fury. Protect mothers. Accountability now. We saw the video. Behind closed doors, meetings stretched late into the night. BodyCam footage was pulled. Dashcam footage was copied. Radio logs were reviewed. The questions got sharper. The timelines didn't align. The gaps became impossible to explain away. The officer was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The announcement didn't calm anything. It fueled it. Imani learned all of this from a hospital bed, her body still aching, her newborn daughter asleep against her chest. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of medical machines and the constant buzz of her phone lighting up with notifications she couldn't bring herself to open yet. She hadn't planned to become a headline. She had only wanted to make it to the hospital in time. Outside those walls, her name was being spoken in courtrooms, on news panels, in city council meetings. Her face, once just another woman in the dark, had become a symbol. Not by choice, but by circumstance, by survival, by evidence that refused to stay buried. And with every share, every replay, every outraged voice demanding answers, one thing became impossible to ignore. This was no longer a private incident on the side of a highway. This was a reckoning. The updates came in waves after that. Slow at first. Then all at once. Suspended pending investigation. Charges under review. Termination effective immediately. Each headline felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else's life. Imani read them in the quiet hours between feedings, the soft weight of her daughter warm against her chest, the hospital room lit only by her phone. She didn't cheer. She didn't celebrate. She just stared at the words and let them settle, heavy and complicated. The department released another statement. This one less careful. More urgent. They confirmed the officer had violated protocol. That he had failed to request medical assistance. That his conduct had not aligned with the values of the department. The video made alignment impossible to deny. Then came the lawsuit. Civil rights violations. Reckless endangerment. Emotional distress. Attorneys spoke in precise language, but the truth underneath it was simple. She had been failed when she was most vulnerable. Months passed. Evidence stacked up. Dashcam. BodyCam. Phone recordings. Radio logs. Expert testimony from doctors who stated plainly that the delay could have cost 2 lives. The settlement was announced on a Tuesday afternoon. Substantial. Public. Accompanied by another press conference, this one attended by city officials, department leadership, and policy advisors. But it wasn't the money that shifted the ground. It was what followed. New emergency response protocols for traffic stops involving medical distress. Mandatory bias training with independent oversight. Clear disciplinary consequences written into policy instead of buried in discretion. A requirement that medical emergencies be treated as medical emergencies. No debate, no delay. Imani watched the announcement from her living room, her daughter gurgling softly beside her. She listened to officials promise change with the same calm voices that had once spoken in vague statements. This time, their words were specific, measurable, written. For the first time, the weight in her chest eased in a way sleep never had. She had never wanted to be an example, never wanted her pain to become proof, never wanted her fear to become evidence in a courtroom. But it had. And because of that, something irreversible had moved. The officer who had stood over her with suspicion and dismissal no longer wore a badge. The department that had tried to contain the story had been forced to confront it. The policies that had failed her had been rewritten in her shadow. Her daughter stirred, tiny fingers curling around her own. Imani looked down and whispered, "You're safe." And for the first time since the rain-soaked night on the highway, she believed it. Morning light filled the room in soft gold, warming the walls, the blankets, the quiet rhythm of a new life. Her daughter slept peacefully against her chest, tiny breaths rising and falling like the gentlest tide. Every time Imani looked at her, awe still caught in her throat. You made it. They both had. The birth hadn't been easy. Nothing about that night had been. But when the final cry had filled the delivery room, strong, loud, undeniable, it had felt like a victory no one could take away. A declaration. A promise. She named her Amara. Strength. Grace. Purpose. At first, The messages had felt overwhelming. Emails from journalists. Calls from advocacy groups. Invitations she didn't feel ready for. She was still learning how to hold newborn, how to exist on broken sleep, how to recover from fear that lingered in her bones longer than the pain ever did. But the stories kept coming. Women who had been dismissed in emergency rooms. Mothers who had been ignored during traffic stops. Families who had lost someone because help came too late. They didn't just see her as a headline. They saw her as proof that speaking up could matter. Imani listened. That became her beginning. She started small. A community forum. A panel discussion at the hospital that had delivered Amara. A quiet conversation with lawmakers who asked, this time, how policy should change instead of telling her why it couldn't. Her voice, once careful and restrained, found new steadiness. Not loud. Not angry. Just unshakable. She spoke about protocols. About bias. About what happens when people in power stop seeing humanity. She spoke about the cost of delay. About the power of documentation. About the stranger who had stopped and chosen compassion. People leaned in when she spoke. Because she wasn't talking about theory. She was talking about survival. Months later, she stood in front of a room filled with nurses, officers, city officials, and mothers just like her. Amara balanced on her hip, eyes bright, curious about everything. This isn't just my story, Imani said gently. It's all of ours. And it doesn't end with me. The room was silent. Listening. She looked down at her daughter and smiled. Out of one terrifying night on a rain-soaked highway, something enduring had grown. Not just reform. Not just accountability. But legacy. A life saved. A voice found. A future changed.